For as long as anyone could remember, the royal guards had been symbols of perfect discipline. People admired the tall guards in their bright uniforms and towering hats, standing so still that they almost looked like statues. Every day, hundreds of visitors gathered around the palace to watch them. They laughed, whispered, took photos, and even tried to make the guards react. But the guards never moved, never smiled, and never spoke. This silence was their tradition, their pride, and their honor. But behind that quiet wall of discipline was a world many people did not know. The guards were human. They breathed, they felt, they thought, and they carried their own stories inside. One of those guards was Thomas Avery, a young man from a small town who had grown up dreaming of serving the kingdom. When he was accepted into the royal guard, his family cried with happiness. His mother hugged him for a long time, saying, "You will make us proud." His father shook his hand, hiding his emotions behind a smile. Thomas promised himself he would never let them down. Training to become a royal guard was not easy. Thomas had to learn how to stand still for long hours without scratching his face or wiping the sweat from his forehead. He practiced holding a straight expression even when birds landed near him or when the sun shone directly into his eyes. He learned how to keep his balance in the rain, how to stay calm during loud crowds, and how to block out distractions. At first, Thomas found it difficult. His legs hurt, his back ached, and sometimes he felt like giving up. But he kept going because he knew what wearing that uniform meant. When he finally became an official royal guard, he felt a strong sense of pride. His first day on duty was unforgettable. The palace was glowing in the morning light, the flag waved softly in the breeze, and the sound of distant carriages echoed in the streets. Thomas stood in his designated spot, straight and focused, knowing people were watching. He did not move, not even a little. His heart beat faster than usual, but his face stayed calm. He felt like a part of something great and historic. Over time, Thomas got used to the routine. Tourists tried all kinds of tricks to get him to react. Some made silly faces. Others waved their hands very close to his eyes. A few pretended to trip, hoping he would look down. But Thomas never broke character. He trained himself to keep his thoughts steady, to let sounds pass through him like wind through leaves. Sometimes he imagined he was a tree, strong, unmoving, and peaceful. Still, even the strongest tree has roots that feel the soil beneath it. And deep inside, Thomas carried a gentle heart. He was kind, thoughtful, and easily touched by small, innocent moments. But he never allowed those feelings to show. That was the rule. A royal guard did not express emotion in front of the public. To Thomas, this rule was both a shield and a challenge. He respected it, but sometimes he wondered if emotion really weakened a guard or if it made him stronger. He remembered something his grandmother used to say, "A person can be strong and soft at the same time." Thomas believed this, but his training told him otherwise. The palace, the ceremony, the uniform, everything demanded perfection. And so every day, Thomas hid his tenderness behind the seriousness of his duty. The palace courtyard was always filled with people from all over the world. They wore colorful clothes, carried cameras, and spoke in many different languages. Children pointed excitedly at the guards, whispering to their parents in amazement. Some were scared, thinking the guards were magical figures that came to life only on special days. Others admired the beauty of the uniforms and the shine of the polished boots. Thomas liked watching people without letting them know he was watching. He noticed the way families held hands, the way friends laughed together, and the way couples leaned close while taking photos. He noticed how different everyone looked, moved, and spoke. Even though he could not respond to them, he felt connected to the crowd in a quiet, invisible way. The world came to him every day, and he stood there, silent but present. One morning, something small but meaningful happened that touched Thomas deeply. As he stood at attention, a little boy walked up to the railing with his father. The boy's eyes were wide with wonder. He tugged on his father's coat and whispered, "Are they robots?" His father chuckled softly and replied, "No, they're people, very strong and very disciplined people." The little boy stared at Thomas with fascination. He waved his tiny hand and whispered shyly, "Hello." Thomas did not move, of course, but inside something warm fluttered. He wanted to wave back, to smile, or at least nod. But he did none of that. He simply remained still, letting the moment pass like a quiet breeze. Even though he could not respond, the child's pure curiosity stayed with him for the rest of the day. Sometimes Thomas wondered how long he could keep this up. Not the standing part, he was used to that, but the emotional stillness, the inner stillness. He believed in discipline, yet he also believed in kindness. Was it possible to be both at once? To show a gentle heart without breaking tradition? He did not know the answer yet, but the question began to grow silently in his mind. In the evenings, after duty, the guards relaxed together in the barracks. They took off their heavy hats, stretched their stiff muscles, and talked about their day. Some joked about tourists making silly attempts to get reactions. Others shared stories about things they saw but pretended not to notice. Thomas listened quietly most of the time. He did not talk much, but when he did, his voice was calm and thoughtful. His fellow guards liked him. They called him Steady Thomas because he carried a peaceful energy. But even they did not know everything about him. They did not know how deeply he felt things. They did not know how moments that seemed small to others could stay in his heart for days. They did not know how much he cared about people, even strangers. Thomas kept most of these feelings to himself, believing they were not meant to be shared. Yet the world outside the palace was full of real, honest emotions. People cried, laughed, hugged, argued, apologized, and celebrated. Watching all of this while staying perfectly still made Thomas feel like he was living behind a glass wall. He could see everything, but he could not reach out. He sometimes wondered whether moments from outside that wall would ever break through and touch him in a way he could not ignore. He did not know that soon such a moment was coming. A moment gentle enough to warm his heart, but strong enough to test the very tradition he had promised to protect. A moment that would remind him he was not just a guard, but also a human being with a heart that could feel deeply. And though Thomas did not realize it yet, that moment would change the way people saw the royal guards, and the way he saw himself. The day the little girl appeared at the palace gate felt like any other day in the beginning. The sky was clear and bright. Sunlight touched the stone walls of the palace, and a soft breeze moved through the courtyard. Visitors were already gathering, some chatting excitedly, some arranging their cameras to capture every moment. Thomas Avery stood in his usual place, straight and focused, his expression calm and unreadable. He had done this routine many times before, so nothing felt unusual. That was what he believed, until he noticed a small figure making her way through the crowd. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. Her tiny feet moved slowly, almost cautiously, as if she did not want to disturb anything around her. She wore a soft pink dress with small white flowers on it, and her hair was tied back in 2 neat braids. But the first thing anyone would notice about her wasn't her dress or her braids. It was the small paper crown sitting proudly on her head. It was clearly handmade. A little uneven, corners bent, colored with crayons and held together with a single piece of tape. But to her, it looked like real royal treasure. She held the hand of a woman who appeared to be her mother, though the girl walked slightly ahead, leading the way with the confidence only a child could have. As they reached the front of the crowd, the mother gently guided her toward the railing. The little girl's eyes widened in wonder when she saw Thomas. To her, he must have looked like a character straight out of a storybook. Tall, steady, dressed in bright colors and wearing a magnificent hat that made him look even more extraordinary. She let go of her mother's hand for a moment and slowly stepped closer to the railing. Her small hands held the edges tightly as she leaned forward. There was no fear on her face, only pure admiration. Thomas, of course, did not move. His gaze remained straight ahead. But even without looking directly at her, he sensed her presence. The soft rustling of her dress, the tiny tapping of her shoes against the ground, the quiet breath she let out as she stared. Small sounds that most people wouldn't even notice reached Thomas clearly. The girl tilted her head slightly, studying him with deep curiosity. She whispered something, but it was too soft for Thomas to hear. Her mother gently placed a hand on her shoulder, but the girl didn't move. Her entire attention was on the guard. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper but filled with admiration, the girl said, "You're my favorite knight." The words were simple, innocent even, but they touched Thomas in a way he did not expect. He had been called many things before: soldier, guard, officer, but never knight, and never with such pure sincerity. Her voice was not teasing like many tourists. She wasn't trying to make him react or laugh. She wasn't testing him. She wasn't treating him like a statue or a challenge. She saw him as something noble, something kind, something heroic. A knight. The idea made something inside Thomas soften. A warmth spread slowly in his chest, rising gently like a soft flame. He reminded himself of the rules. A guard does not react. A guard stays still. But in that moment, the rule felt heavier than usual. He wanted to respond, not with words, but with a small gesture to show her he appreciated her innocence. But he couldn't. He held his position, steady as ever. Yet, without meaning to, Thomas's eyes flickered slightly. A tiny spark of warmth, barely noticeable, passed through them. It lasted only a second, a moment so quick that most would miss it. But someone didn't miss it. A young tourist standing nearby had been recording the guards with her phone. She wasn't trying to catch anything special. She was simply collecting memories of her visit. But when Thomas's eyes softened, her camera captured it. The moment was gentle, human, and unexpected. The little girl didn't notice the camera. She was too busy watching Thomas with admiration. She puffed out her chest proudly and touched her paper crown, adjusting it as if she wanted to make sure she looked ready for a royal meeting. Her mother smiled softly, touched by her daughter's innocence. "Sweetheart, he can't talk," her mother whispered. "I know," the girl said, her voice full of certainty. "Knights don't always talk. They listen, and they protect." The mother looked surprised, but also moved. Thomas, still silent, felt those words echo inside him. Protect. He had always known guarding meant protection, but hearing the word from a child made it sound more meaningful. In her eyes, he wasn't just following orders or performing a duty. He was someone worthy of admiration. A few people in the crowd noticed the little girl and her paper crown. They smiled warmly. Some took pictures, not to mock her, but because the moment felt sweet. The girl noticed none of this. Her world at that moment included only Thomas. After observing him for a long moment, she lifted her small hand and gave him a tiny salute. It was not perfect. Her fingers were not quite straight. Her arm was a bit wobbly, but it was filled with sincerity. Thomas felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen many salutes, thousands even, from trained soldiers and officers. But this one, this simple, imperfect salute felt different. It felt honest, pure. Something inside him whispered that he had to salute back, even if just a little. But he couldn't. The rule held him in place. Still, his eyes softened again, just slightly, just for a second. Not a smile, not a nod, not any movement that could break his discipline. Just a small change in the look of his eyes, like the warmth of sunlight passing through a cold window. The girl's face brightened. She didn't know why, but she sensed a kindness in him. She waved once more, then stepped back into her mother's arms. Her mother knelt down, adjusting the paper crown so it wouldn't fall. The girl whispered, "He saw me, Mommy." And her mother hugged her gently, saying, "Yes, sweetheart, I think he did." The pair slowly walked away, the girl turning around twice to wave at Thomas one last time. Even though the moment was over, the feeling lingered. Thomas kept his posture, but something inside him had changed. The warmth from her words had settled into his heart, quiet but strong. As the day continued, visitors came and went. Some tried to make the guards smile, others posed dramatically for pictures, and many simply admired the palace. But Thomas kept thinking about the little girl with the paper crown. He thought about how she looked at him, not as someone to entertain, but as someone to respect. He thought about her salute, small but full of meaning. He thought about her belief that he was a knight. Hours later, when the guards finally marched back into the barracks for their break, Thomas felt lighter than usual. The memory of that soft, pure moment stayed with him like a warm glow. Meanwhile, the tourist who captured the scene uploaded the video online without thinking much of it. She simply described it as a sweet moment at the palace. But what she didn't know was that the video would soon be shared, talked about, and admired by many people. Not because something funny had happened, but because something human had happened. And Thomas, unaware of all this, sat quietly in the barracks that evening, still thinking about the little girl's words. "You're my favorite knight." The sentence echoed in his heart again and again, like a gentle reminder that even in silence, kindness could speak loudly. What he didn't know was that this small moment was just the beginning. More moments were coming, moments that would challenge him, move him, and reveal the deep humanity hidden behind the stillness of the royal guards. The weeks that followed the little girl's visit passed quietly, but the memory of her soft words stayed with Thomas like a gentle echo. He didn't talk about it, not even to the other guards, but the moment lived inside him. It reminded him that even a small gesture could touch someone's heart. And although he continued to stand tall and still every day, something inside him felt more open, more aware. Tourists came and went, just as they always did. Some tried to make the guards laugh, others asked endless questions, and some simply enjoyed taking pictures. Thomas continued his duty with the same calm discipline he had practiced for years. But every once in a while, he wondered if another moment, like the one with the little girl, would happen again. He never expected it, and he certainly never expected something even more powerful to find its way to him. It happened on a bright morning when the courtyard was unusually crowded. A tour group had just arrived and people were gathering near the railing to watch the guards. Cameras clicked, voices filled the air, and shoes shuffled across the stone ground. Thomas stood in his spot, focused as always, letting the noise become a distant hum. Then he noticed something changing in the atmosphere. Not a sound, but a feeling. The crowd's voices softened. People stepped aside, clearing a small path. Thomas could sense curiosity, respect, and something else, a quiet kind of emotion. He didn't look down or turn his head, but he could tell something different was happening. Slowly, a wheelchair was pushed into view. An older man sat in it, wrapped in a warm coat and wearing a cap that shaded his tired eyes. His hair was silver, his hands slightly shaky, and his expression carried a gentle sadness mixed with dignity. The man's daughter, or perhaps a caregiver, stood behind him, pushing the chair carefully, making sure it didn't bump against the stones. The older man wasn't just visiting the palace. He was approaching it with meaning, as though the place held memories for him. When the wheelchair stopped near Thomas, the man looked up slowly. His eyes were warm, yet filled with life's long journey. Years of experience, years of effort, years of stories that only he knew. His gaze settled on Thomas, Not on his uniform, not on his station, but on him as a person. The crowd grew quiet. Something about the moment felt important. The air seemed to pause, as if waiting. With great effort, the older man lifted his right hand. His fingers trembled. His arm moved slowly, as if he was carrying something heavy. But he kept going. His hand rose higher, inch by inch, until finally it reached the height of a salute. It was not a sharp, strong salute. It was gentle, shaky, and imperfect. But it was filled with more meaning than any salute Thomas had ever seen. Thomas felt a wave of emotion rush through him, a soft, deep feeling that touched the center of his chest. He recognized the gesture instantly. It was a salute of respect, one given by someone who understood what it meant to stand for something. The old man looked directly at Thomas, and in that look was a message without words, a message that said, "I see you. I honor what you do. I know what discipline means. I know what service means. And I respect you." The silence around them grew even deeper. Even the breeze felt gentle, careful not to disturb the moment. The old man's hand remained raised for a while, trembling slightly, but steady in spirit. Thomas's heart tightened. He knew the rules. He knew he was not supposed to move. He knew he had to remain still, no matter what. But this salute, this small, tender gesture, was more than a greeting. It was a bridge between two hearts that understood each other. The man had used the last of his strength to show respect, and Thomas felt something inside him answer that call. Without even thinking, without planning it, Thomas lowered his head by the smallest amount. A slight, gentle nod, so tiny that many people might have missed it, yet meaningful enough that anyone watching closely would understand. The crowd gasped softly, not in mockery, but in admiration. They knew they were witnessing something rare, something real, something that wasn't part of a ceremony or a performance. It was simply one human acknowledging another. The old man's eyes softened. His lips curved into a faint smile, fragile but full of gratitude. His hand lowered slowly, using the last bit of strength he had. His daughter placed her hands on his shoulders and whispered something to him, though Thomas couldn't hear it. Whatever she said made the old man smile again, this time with pride. Thomas kept his posture, but inside, he felt deeply moved. The warmth from the girl with the paper crown had been sweet, gentle. But this moment, this salute, felt different. It felt like a connection that reached across generations. Like a passing of honor from someone who had already lived a long life to someone still in the middle of his journey. The woman turned the wheelchair slightly, ready to leave. But the old man placed his hand softly on her wrist, asking her to wait. He took one more look at Thomas, as if memorizing his face, his uniform, and the moment itself. And then, with a soft, peaceful breath, the man nodded, slowly, tenderly, mirroring the respect Thomas had shown him. The crowd didn't clap, they didn't cheer, they didn't speak. They simply stood there, touched by the quiet beauty of what they had witnessed. As the wheelchair was pushed away, Thomas felt the emotions settle in his heart like a warm, steady light. He had not spoken, he had not smiled, he had not broken the essence of his duty. Yet, in a way, he felt like he had communicated more in that tiny nod than he could have with 1,000 words. When the guards marched back to the barracks that afternoon, Thomas remained silent, lost in thought. The other guards chatted about their day, laughing about small things, but Thomas carried the moment within him, a respectful salute from a man who had given his strength to a gesture of honor. Later, some of the guards mentioned they had seen the moment, not with judgment, but with admiration. One guard said softly, "That nod, it wasn't breaking the rules. It was honoring something bigger." Thomas didn't reply, but he felt grateful someone understood. That night, as Thomas lay in his bunk, he replayed the scene in his mind. The old man's trembling hand, his soft eyes, his smile, and the weight of his salute, gentle but full of meaning. Thomas realized something important. Standing still didn't mean his heart had to be still. Wearing a uniform didn't mean he had to hide his humanity. Discipline and kindness could exist together. One didn't take away from the other. If anything, they strengthened each other. What he didn't know was that his small nod had been captured by someone in the crowd. Not in a dramatic way, but quietly. The video wasn't flashy. It wasn't trying to prove anything. It simply showed a guard acknowledging a man who offered him a salute full of life's history. And just like the moment with the little girl, this moment would soon touch the hearts of many people. But Thomas didn't know any of that. All he knew was that something deep inside him had shifted. And he didn't realize that this shift was leading toward an even bigger moment, one that would test his discipline, challenge his heart, and show the world the true humanity behind the uniform. The day the rainstorm arrived began like any other, but there was something unusual in the air. The sky was gray, the clouds were heavy, and the wind carried a cool, damp smell. Even early in the morning, people arriving at the palace carried umbrellas, jackets, and hats, prepared for the weather that was slowly building over the city. Thomas stood in his usual place, strong and steady, watching the sky shift in color. Rain was not new to him. Guards trained to stand through sunshine, rain, wind, and even snow. But today felt different, though he didn't yet know why. Tourists gathered as usual, some with raincoats, some with cameras safely tucked under plastic covers. The soft murmur of voices filled the courtyard. People whispered about the weather but stayed to watch the changing of the guard ceremony. Even rain could not stop the tradition. The guards had done it for years, and they would continue as long as their duty required. As the first drops of rain began to fall, lightly tapping on the stone ground, Thomas remained still. The rain touched his uniform, leaving small dark spots that grew larger with every drop. His tall hat absorbed the water slowly, but he didn't move. None of the guards did. They stood like statues, letting the sky release its gentle shower over them. The tourists huddled under umbrellas, some laughing softly as they tried to stay dry. A few children pointed excitedly at the guards, amazed that they didn't even blink as the rain fell harder. Soon, the drizzle became a steady shower, and the air filled with the soft sound of raindrops touching everything. The railings, the stones, the umbrellas, and the guards' boots. Then came the moment for the changing of the guard ceremony. The new group of guards marched into the courtyard with perfect coordination. Their polished boots splashed lightly in small puddles forming under their feet, but their steps remained steady. The leader of the group gave a firm command, and the ceremony began. Thomas watched with quiet attention, as he always did. The rain made the ground slippery, and he hoped the younger guards would stay balanced. Some of them were new and still adjusting to marching in different weather conditions. Rain had a way of challenging even the most trained person, not because it was dangerous, but because it demanded more focus. As the guards marched closer, forming their lines with precision, the rain began to fall even harder. It wasn't a storm, but it was enough to make visibility a little blurry. The guards' uniforms glistened with moisture, and their hats dripped tiny streams of water, yet all of them stayed composed, determined to complete the ceremony flawlessly. Then something unexpected happened. One of the youngest guards, someone who had only recently joined the ranks, stepped onto a small puddle he didn't see. His boots slid just a little, not enough to make him fall, but enough to break the rhythm of his march. His body wobbled as he tried to regain balance. His eyes widened, and for a brief second, fear rushed across his face. Not fear of falling, but fear of breaking the tradition. The crowd noticed. A quiet gasp spread through them. The young guard tensed, trying with all his strength to stay upright. His foot slid again, slightly, and that's when Thomas acted. He didn't move dramatically. He didn't break formation, but he took one small step, just half a step, forward and slightly sideways. It was barely noticeable, yet perfectly timed. As the young guard's foot slipped again, Thomas extended his hand just enough for the boy to steady himself without drawing too much attention. Their hands touched for a brief moment, a simple, quick gesture. But the meaning behind it was deep. The young guard grabbed Thomas's arm lightly, steadied himself, and regained his posture. His breath was shaky, but his expression returned to calm discipline. Thomas's hand returned to his side instantly, his posture straight once more. To the crowd, it looked like nothing had happened, but anyone watching closely could sense the quiet humanity in that tiny moment. The young guard glanced at Thomas with gratitude in his eyes, though his face remained serious. Thomas didn't look back, but the warm understanding between them didn't need words. It didn't need a smile. It was a silent connection built in less than a second. As the ceremony continued, the rain softened again, becoming a gentle drizzle. The crowd relaxed, their attention turning back to the ceremony. Some captured the moment on their phones without even knowing the significance of what had just happened. But a few people saw it clearly. One older couple whispered to each other, touched by the quiet kindness. A teenager with a camera lowered it slowly, realizing she had just witnessed something rare. Kindness didn't need applause. It didn't need to be loud. It could be soft, quick, and still powerful. After the ceremony ended, the guards marched off in perfect formation. Thomas felt a small warmth inside him, similar to what he felt when the little girl saluted him and when the elderly man raised his trembling hand. This warmth wasn't loud or dramatic. It was soft and real, reminding him why humans were capable of caring, even in the smallest ways. In the barracks, the guards removed their wet uniforms and rubbed their arms to warm up. The young guard approached Thomas quietly. His voice was low, careful, respectful. "Thank you," he whispered. Thomas only nodded. There was no need for a big conversation. The young guard understood more from that nod than from any long speech. The others had noticed too. One of the older guards smiled softly and said, "Rain tests balance. Good job, Thomas." Thomas didn't reply, but the gentle pat on his shoulder said enough. The moment wasn't about rules. It wasn't about breaking tradition. It was about helping someone stay strong when they almost stumbled. A simple gesture in the rain, unnoticed by most, but meaningful to those who saw it. That night, when Thomas lay in his bed, he listened to the soft tapping of leftover rain outside the window. He thought about how a simple step had meant so much. He thought about the girl with the paper crown, the elderly man with the gentle salute, and now this young guard who almost slipped. Each moment had touched him in a different way, reminding him that being a guard wasn't just about staying still, it was also about being human. What Thomas didn't know was that one of the tourists had captured the moment with the young guard. Later that evening, she posted the short clip online. She wrote, "A small act of kindness during the rain. Even guards look out for each other." The video showed Thomas's small step, the young guard's wobble, and the brief touch that kept him steady. People began to share it, touched by how calm and caring the moment was. Thomas wasn't aware of this. He simply fell asleep with a warm feeling in his heart, unaware that soon the world would see another side of the royal guards. Not the silent statues people expected, but the quiet, gentle humans behind the uniform. And this quiet warmth was leading him toward one final moment. A moment that would show everyone, including Thomas himself, that sometimes the strongest thing a guard could do was not just stand still, but make a small, meaningful choice from the heart. The gentle rain from the previous day had passed, leaving the palace courtyard fresh and bright the next morning. The stones on the ground sparkled softly under the sunlight, as if they had been washed clean by nature itself. Birds chirped nearby, and small puddles reflected the sky like tiny mirrors. Thomas stood in his usual place, feeling the cool morning breeze against his uniform. He looked calm on the outside, but inside, he carried the memories of the last few weeks with surprising clarity. He remembered the little girl with the paper crown, whose sweet voice had touched him so deeply. He remembered the elderly man in the wheelchair, whose trembling salute had moved him in a way he never expected. And he remembered the young guard who nearly slipped in the rain, and the tiny moment of support that had passed silently between them. 3 small moments, each gentle and meaningful, had slowly softened something inside him. The world outside continued as usual. People walked through the courtyard, chatting and snapping photos. Children pointed at the guards, amazed by their stillness. Adults admired the beauty of the palace. Life went on, unaware that the guard standing in front of them was quietly changing inside, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a way that made his heart a little warmer. By now, several videos of Thomas had circled around online. People from different places had watched the tiny flicker in his eyes when the little girl saluted him. They had seen the respectful nod he gave the elderly man. They had noticed how he helped the young guard during the rain. These videos weren't posted to make fun of him. They were posted because people felt touched by the gentle humanity behind his duty. Thomas didn't know this. He didn't use social media. And even if he did, he would never have imagined himself becoming the subject of such attention. To him, he was just a guard doing his duty, living each day with calm discipline. He had no idea that people were already calling him the kind guard online. They weren't mocking him, they were celebrating him. Later that afternoon, something different happened. The commander called the guards together before their next shift. He was a man of few words, but his presence always carried weight. As the guards stood in a line, listening carefully, he looked at them with a thoughtful expression. "I want to speak to you all about something," he began. His voice was steady, calm, and a little gentle. "There have been moments these past few weeks that people have noticed. Small moments, human moments." Thomas felt his stomach tighten slightly. He wondered if he had broken a rule. He wondered if he would be corrected for the slight nod he gave, or the small step he took to help the young guard. The commander continued. "People have been watching us for years. They come to see discipline, tradition, and strength, and we give them that. But lately, they have seen something more." He paused, looking slowly across the group of guards. "They have seen kindness. They have seen respect. And they have seen that behind these uniforms stand people with real hearts." A few guards glanced at one another subtly, but Thomas kept his eyes forward, unsure of where the conversation was leading. The commander continued, his voice lower now but warm. "I know some of you worry that showing emotion means breaking discipline, but I want to remind you of something important. Discipline is not about hiding who you are. It is about carrying your duty with honor. And kindness," he said softly, "is not a weakness. It is a form of strength." Thomas felt something release inside him, like a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The commander nodded once in satisfaction. "Keep your training, keep your posture, but do not forget that you are human. If a moment calls for compassion, let your heart guide you, quietly, respectfully, and sincerely." The meeting ended, and the guards prepared for duty. Thomas felt lighter than he had in a long time. The commander's words weren't just permission, they were understanding. He wasn't being told to change. He was being told that he could be both strong and kind without betraying his uniform. When Thomas returned to the courtyard for his next shift, he stood with a renewed sense of purpose. The palace looked the same. The visitors were the same. His uniform felt the same. but something inside him felt different. He felt settled, as if his heart and duty were finally standing side by side instead of in two separate places. As the day went on, more visitors arrived. A young couple stood nearby, the woman resting her head gently on the man's shoulder as they took pictures. A group of school children giggled excitedly, while their teacher reminded them to stay behind the railing. A teenager carefully sketched the guards in her notebook. Life moved around Thomas with warm energy. Later in the afternoon, a small boy walked up with his father. The boy held a toy sword made of foam and wore a shiny silver plastic helmet. When he reached the railing, he lifted his chin proudly and stood tall, trying to imitate Thomas. His father laughed softly and encouraged him. "Look, he's standing just like the guard," the father said. The boy tried to stay completely still, but after a moment, he wiggled and giggled. "This is hard," he whispered loudly. Thomas didn't move, but inside he smiled. Even through his stillness, he felt the warmth of being part of moments like these, moments that brought joy to people. At the end of the day, as the sun began to set, the courtyard glowed with a soft golden light. The shadows stretched long and thin across the ground. Thomas felt calm, peaceful, and strangely grateful. The last few weeks had changed him, not by force, but by gentle reminders that even the quietest moments could matter. When the guards finally marched back inside, Thomas felt a sense of completeness. He had not broken any rules in a harmful way. He had not disrespected the tradition he loved so deeply. Instead, he had found a way to honor it with something extra, something human. In the barracks, the younger guard who had slipped in the rain approached Thomas again, holding a cup of warm tea. "You're a good man," he said softly, offering the cup to Thomas. Thomas accepted it without a word, giving the young guard a slow nod that carried gratitude. Later that night, Thomas stepped outside for a moment. The moon hung high, glowing softly over the palace roof. The air was quiet except for the distant sound of carriages and footsteps. Thomas breathed slowly, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. He thought about everything: the girl, the old man, the young guard, the commander's words, the countless people who watched the guards every day looking for something special, and he realized something simple. People weren't touched by perfection. They were touched by sincerity. The uniform made him a guard, but kindness made him human. And somewhere between the two, he had found a balance. As he stood under the moonlight, Thomas whispered quietly in his heart, not with words spoken out loud, but with a feeling: "I can be both." And he knew deep inside that this simple truth would stay with him for the rest of his life.